There are a number of situations where we need to count the number of characters in a piece of text. This is where the function length comes in. All we need to do is pass the source text to the function and it gives us back the count. So let's explore length in some examples. So if you open up the lesson Pi file and make sure you're on the How It Works scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the button and I'm going to add a tap trigger. And to this tap trigger, I'm going to add a text response. And I'm going to target the result layer. I'm going to come to content, change it to formula, and I'm going to open up the formula window. And I'm going to start typing the length function, choose it from the list. Next, I'm going to press the plus button and I'm going to choose the input field. And I want to get the text property from the input field. So I'm going to type a full stop and choose the text property. I'm going to click OK. Okay, so let's give this a test to see what happens. So I'm going to type some text in here. Going to press the button and you can see that we've got a number returned back to us. So this number 19 equates to the amount of characters that I've typed into the input field. Okay, so let's see length in action in a more practical example. Okay, so let's come back to our Pi file. We're going to go to the next scene called Starter. And in the Pi file, we have two elements, a text field and a button. And what we're going to do is we're going to use length to enable the button, but only when the amount of characters we type in are 6 or more. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the input layer here. And we're going to come over and add a detect trigger. In the detect trigger, we're going to choose the text property. And we're going to add a condition. We're going to choose formula. And we're going to open up the formula window. Okay, so let's start typing our function again. And then choose it from the list. We're going to tap plus. And again, we want to get the input field's text property, just like we did before. And we're going to click OK. Now this time we need to choose an equality. So we want to check, as I said, that there's at least 6 characters typed in, but we want to allow more characters to be typed in. So we want to use greater than or equal to, which is this one. And then finally, we need to type in the number of characters we're looking for, which is in this case 6. So we're just going to type 6 in here. Okay, so we want some stuff to happen when this condition is met. And initially, we're just going to change the opacity. So you can see here this button is currently at 30% opacity. So we're just going to bring the opacity up to 100. So it visually looks like it's enabled. So let's come back to our condition, add an opacity. Make sure the button is chosen and just bring the opacity up to 100. Okay, let's give that a preview and a test. So I'm going to start typing some characters in. And as soon as I get to the 6th character, you can see that the opacity of the login button has increased to 100. It now looks like the login button is enabled. Okay, so next let's make the button actually functional. So we'll actually create a disabled enabled functionality. And what we're going to do is we're going to hook up this button to this next scene here called next screen. And we're going to hook it up with a jump response. But we're only going to allow the jump response to execute after there is at least 6 characters in that input field. So we're going to use the length function we've already created to check that the user has typed in enough characters. Once they've done that, the jump response will be enabled and it will jump to the next scene. Okay, so let's give that a go. Let's come back to our Pi file. And the first thing we're going to do to achieve this is we're going to create a variable. So we're going to use a variable to control the state between disabled and enabled. So I'm going to come over to my variables panel here and I'm going to choose a for this scene variable, or what I like to call a local variable. We're going to call this enabled. And we're just going to use a number variable here. Cool, so let's come back to our condition and we're going to add an assign response. And we want to assign a value to that enabled variable. So as soon as we've got 6 characters, we're going to change the value of the variable enabled from 0 to 1. So we're just going to write 1 in here. Okay, cool. Next, we're going to create the jump trigger for the button. So we're going to add a tap trigger. Choose our button. Add a condition. And this condition is going to look to see if the enabled variable is set to 1. Okay, so we're going to look for that variable. And this time we want to use equals, and we want to look for the value 1. And if that's true, if enabled is equal 1, we want to execute our jump. So let's add our jump trigger in and select our next screen scene. Cool, that's all we need to do. Let's come over and give that a test. Okay, so I'm going to come to my password field. I'm going to start typing my characters in. And you can see that the login button is now enabled. And if I tap it, we jump to the next scene. Cool, so let's just check that again, check that's working. If I just reload my prototype here, you can see that I'm tapping the button and obviously nothing's happening. So it is indeed, the jump trigger is indeed being blocked until we've typed in our 6 characters. And again, you can see it is now enabled. Okay, so as you can see, length is a really useful function that we can use for lots of different things, such as password interfaces, or anything really where you need to check that a certain amount of characters have been typed. I must say that I use length function quite a lot in my prototype, so it's a really useful tool in your toolkit. Okay, so this brings us to the end of this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.